her world shattered in an instant. One moment, Amelia's life seemed complete. She was glowing with the warmth of pregnancy, carrying the child she had dreamed of for years, and standing beside a man she thought was her soulmate. The next moment, she was left alone in a cold, echoing mansion, discarded like she never mattered. Her billionaire husband, Daniel, the man who had once sworn eternal love, had abandoned her for someone else, someone he had met just weeks ago, and not just anyone. A bartender, a woman who, in his eyes, represented the thrill of freedom and youth, while Amelia was now dismissed as nothing more than a burden, tethered by responsibility and the weight of motherhood. That betrayal cut deeper than any wound, for it wasn't just her heart Daniel had crushed, it was the future of their unborn child too. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and the power of inner strength, take a moment to like this video, share it with friends, subscribe to Royal Stories, and let your voice be heard in the comments. Together, we keep alive the belief that love, justice, and fate have a way of restoring balance, even in the darkest times. The night Daniel confessed his decision replayed in Amelia's mind like a haunting film reel. The setting had been deceptively ordinary, their dining table laid with expensive china, the golden chandeliers casting warm light, the air filled with the faint aroma of roasted lamb prepared by their chef. Amelia, dressed in a flowing cream maternity gown, had been eagerly telling him about the nursery she had decorated. The soft pastel walls, the tiny crib, the toys she had carefully chosen. She had smiled with tears in her eyes, speaking about how their baby would one day take their first steps across that very floor. She believed they were building a home together. But Daniel's face was cold, almost detached. He hadn't touched his food. When she looked at him, searching for warmth, she saw only indifference. Then, with a bluntness that sliced through her heart, he told her he no longer loved her, that he couldn't pretend any longer, and that he wanted a divorce. His words fell like knives. She thought it was a cruel joke, an outburst of stress, maybe even exhaustion. But then came the final blow. He was in love with someone else. A bartender he had met at one of his clubs. Someone exciting. Someone who made him feel alive again. Amelia remembered gripping the edge of the table so tightly her knuckles went white, the room spinning as though the ground beneath her had collapsed. She thought of the child inside her, the life they had created, and begged him to reconsider, not out of desperation for herself, but for the innocent little soul who deserved a father's love. But Daniel's eyes did not waver. He was already gone, his heart claimed by a woman who poured drinks for strangers, while the wife who had given him loyalty, devotion, and now his heir, was dismissed as though she were nothing more than an old chapter in his story. The days that followed blurred into a suffocating fog. The mansion, once a symbol of dreams, became a prison of loneliness. Everywhere Amelia turned, memories mocked her. The piano Daniel had once played for her stood silent in the grand hall. Their wedding portrait still hung above the fireplace, their smiles frozen in time, a cruel reminder of promises broken. She would wake in the night, clutching her belly, listening for footsteps that never came, hoping for the sound of his voice, only to be greeted by silence. Her heart ached not only for herself but for her child, who had already been abandoned before even taking a first breath. Tabloids feasted on the scandal. Headlines screamed of the billionaire's shocking romance with a woman half Amelia's status. Paparazzi photos splashed across glossy covers. Daniel laughing in clubs, his arm around the young bartender, their lips pressed together in public. Each image was another dagger. Amelia stopped going out, stopped opening her phone, stopped answering friends who tried to reach her. She felt stripped of dignity, her pain laid bare for the world to consume like entertainment. But the cruelest wound of all was Daniel's indifference. He did not call, did not ask about her health, did not send even a word of concern for the child they had created. To him, it was as though Amelia and the baby no longer existed. And in those darkest moments, when she sat alone on the edge of her bed, tears soaking the pillow, she wondered if she had been nothing more than a placeholder in his glittering life. A woman who had served her purpose until he found someone better. Yet, in that crushing silence, Amelia began to feel something stirring inside her, not just despair but defiance. Every time her unborn child kicked, she felt a pulse of strength. Each heartbeat, each flutter reminded her that she was not entirely alone. She had a reason to fight, a reason to rise. Daniel had stripped her of love, but he could not strip her of motherhood. He had abandoned her, but he could not erase her worth. There were nights when she would sit in the nursery, the dim glow of a lamp casting shadows across the room. She would run her fingers along the wooden crib she had chosen with so much hope, her tears falling softly onto the sheets. But then she would whisper to her baby, promising a different kind of life. "You will know love," she would murmur, pressing her hand against her belly. "You will know strength, and you will never be unwanted." Slowly, Amelia began to piece herself back together. She forced herself out of bed, prepared meals even when she had no appetite, and walked in the gardens just to feel the sun on her skin. She clung to small routines as lifelines. Some days she felt stronger, other days she collapsed back into despair. But through it all, she carried her child with unwavering devotion. And though the world saw her as broken, though Daniel saw her as discarded, Amelia carried a truth no one yet knew. She had hidden her true self for love, buried her identity so she could be seen for who she was and not for what she came from. But now, as betrayal burned through her like fire, she began to realize that the time might soon come when she would no longer have to hide. Because Amelia was not just Daniel's abandoned wife. She was something far greater, something he would one day regret forgetting. When Amelia finally walked out of the mansion for the last time, she carried no jewels, no suitcases bursting with luxury gowns, and no trace of the life she once thought was hers forever. She carried only her dignity, a small bag of essentials, and the unborn child who had become her anchor. The grand iron gates of Daniel's estate closed behind her with a thundering clang, as though sealing off a chapter of her life she would never return to. For the first time in years, Amelia felt both lost and strangely free. Her journey did not take her to a hotel or a rented apartment in the city. Instead, she boarded a private jet, one arranged not by Daniel, but by her family. The family she had distanced herself from when she chose to live simply, hoping for love untainted by money. They welcomed her back without hesitation, no questions, no judgments. In their eyes, she was not the woman abandoned by a billionaire. She was Amelia Stoneheart, daughter of the legendary diamond magnate Edward Stoneheart, the man whose influence stretched from African mines to European boardrooms. She had hidden that name, buried it under silence, all because she wanted to be loved as a woman, not as an heiress. But now, with betrayal cutting deep, Amelia no longer needed to hide. The first sight of the diamond lands after years away struck her like a revelation. The African sun blazed down on vast stretches of golden earth, where the Stoneheart mines glittered with promise and power. Hundreds of workers moved with practiced rhythm, their faces lined with effort, their eyes filled with hope. The air carried a scent of dust and iron, mixed with the raw energy of ambition. For them, the Stonehearts were not just employers, they were guardians of livelihoods, providers of schools, clinics, and futures. And Amelia, once the quiet daughter in the shadows, was now greeted as their returning queen. Her father, aged but strong, embraced her tightly when she arrived. His silver hair shone beneath the sunlight, and his voice trembled as he whispered, "You are home, my child. You were never lost." For a moment, Amelia allowed herself to collapse into his arms, the weight of her sorrow dissolving into his steady presence. But when she lifted her head, she was no longer the broken woman Daniel had abandoned. She was the Stoneheart Heiress, carrying not only the bloodline of her family, but the future of her own child. The following months reshaped Amelia. Pregnancy made her body heavy, yet it also gave her strength. Every morning, she walked through the minings, not as a distant heiress, but as a leader who listened to the voices of her people. She asked about their families, improved their working conditions, and ensured that wages were fair. She introduced new safety measures, hired teachers to build schools for the children, and funded healthcare programs that gave mothers and infants a fighting chance at life. The workers adored her, not because she held power, but because she cared. Where Daniel had seen her as a burden, the world here saw her as a beacon, and Amelia thrived in the role. She wore no designer gowns, only simple cotton dresses suited for the climate, her hair pulled back, her feet often coated with dust. But she glowed in a way she never had in Daniel's marble halls. Her glow came not from jewels but from purpose. Each decision she made was for the child growing within her, for the people who looked to her with trust, and for herself, to prove that betrayal could not define her, only strengthen her. Meanwhile, Daniel's glittering empire began to collapse. The media that once celebrated his glamorous lifestyle turned on him as scandal after scandal erupted. his young bartender mistress, once his new beginning, became the face of endless tabloid mockery. Investors withdrew, disgusted by his recklessness, and lawsuits piled up against him. His fortune dwindled, his reputation shattered. Yet none of it mattered to Amelia anymore. She did not need revenge. Fate was already writing its own justice. The day her child was born became the pinnacle of Amelia's transformation. In a quiet hospital built near the mines, she gave birth to a beautiful baby girl. Tears streamed down her face as she held the tiny, fragile life against her chest. The baby's cries filled the room. But for Amelia, they were the sweetest sounds she had ever heard. She named her daughter Aurora, meaning dawn, because she was the beginning of a new life, a light that rose after the darkest night. In that moment, Amelia vowed that no betrayal, no heartbreak would ever define them again. They would write their own story, one of strength, dignity, and love. Years passed and Amelia's legend grew. She became not just the Stoneheart Heiress, but the Stoneheart matriarch, the woman who rebuilt an empire with compassion, vision, and iron will. Under her leadership, the Diamond Empire flourished like never before. But what made her story remarkable was not wealth. It was the way she carried her pain and turned it into power. She never allowed bitterness to consume her. Instead, she poured love into her daughter, into her people, into her work. The world eventually learned the truth. Articles appeared in major publications, revealing Amelia Stoneheart's identity, her hidden wealth, and her rise from abandonment to power. People who once pitied her now admired her. Daniel, watching from the ruins of his own fortune, saw the woman he had thrown away, everything he had once pretended to be. Respected, powerful, unshakable. And though he longed to return, to beg for forgiveness, Amelia never looked back. She had closed that chapter forever. Her life became a testament that no betrayal can break a soul that chooses strength over despair. That true worth is not measured by who loves you or who abandons you, but by the love you give to yourself and to others. Amelia did not just survive Daniel's betrayal. She became greater because of it. And as she stood years later on the balcony of her family estate, Aurora at her side, the African sun bathing them in gold, Amelia finally understood her place in the world. She was not defined by what she lost, but by what she built. If this story touched your heart, I invite you to like this video, share it with those who believe in resilience, and subscribe to Royal Stories for more tales that prove how strength can rise from pain. Let us know in the comments what part of Amelia's journey inspired you the most, and together, let's celebrate stories of courage, healing, and destiny. Special request to comment: if you believe that no betrayal can destroy a strong soul, strength always wins, in the comments below.